welcome to our show In Conversation. Today we have with us Ms. Ika Bethari. She is President Director and C.E.O of PT Asian Logistics, Bulk Logistics, a very well-known and reputed company, not only in Indonesia, but in the world. Welcome to our show, ma'am.
Thank you, Captain Virendra, for having us in your show. It is a pleasure for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, could you please tell us role of Indonesia in the commodity markets with particular focus on dry bulk imports and exports?
Okay, I think Indonesia has been known as a major exporter of several agricultural as well as natural resources and commodities for the world. In 2019 itself, Indonesia worth export of coal was worth around 22 billion US dollar. That positioned Indonesia as the second largest coal exporter in the world. But as you know that the coal industry is one of the hardest hit by this pandemic when the China shut down their manufacturing back from December until February 2020. I think the world trade of coal was plummeted. And now, even though, China business and manufacturing has slowly returned to a normal situation, but unfortunately, the China's government still imposed several restrictions. As you may already know, maybe, safety, health measure, as well as other restriction apply to any cargo arriving to China. And then nowadays, the custom clearing process will be take around 40 days instead of in the past only a week. So even with this restriction in place, but China coal, according to Reuters, in the first half 2020 jumped by 27% from the same period last year. So that was, around 127 actually million tons coal was exported. So it makes that, China would likely tighten their coal import on the second half 2020. This is actually to protect their domestic coal industry that has been staggering after the coal record import in the 4 months 2020. This expected decrease in the coal of China would definitely exacerbate coal exporters just like us in Indonesia, Australia, as well as Russia, which I believe has already been pending due to the weak demand since the pandemic. And then Chinese coal miner itself, they have cranked out, record output in 2020. This is actually to respond to their government calls to ensure the energy supplies in China. But the flood of import, coupled by the uh, lower consumption of the electricity, is actually slashed their profit margin by around 30% in the first quarter. And then on the demand side, as on the other part of the world, majority are still continue in lockdown. Business still close their door, I believe. People are still sheltering at home. And then inevitably, the demand for China project has not yet back to normal, at least not in the year to come, I believe. So that's the global business disruption will still profoundly upend the coal industry. And then let's look around the world. Tell me about India. I believe that you know better than myself. But from what I heard, India, as the world's second largest coal consumer in the world, your government has already now prioritized cheap solar energy. This is actually to respond to the slump in the electricity demand. The next question is what happened actually in other Asian countries, just like Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, that in the past were predicted as the largest growth or the biggest growth countries and industry of coal. But due to this pandemic and then falling of the renewable price as well as oil price, and then the stronger, environmental campaign, for example, by Greta Thunberg, for example. So it pushed, all those countries actually to put the coal related project on hold. And what about Japan and Korea? I think they phase out the domestic coal usage, and then from the financial side, they actually now no longer accepting any financing proposal related to any coal project. So I guess this will put coal
Yeah,
production.
actually, my second question is very related to this, what you are saying. And I was
Mm.
actually wanted to ask you, what is the, potential growth in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, okay, yeah. So I think in the next 2 to 5 years, like I mentioned earlier, that Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, they have to put all the coal-related project on hold. And Korea and Japan, as I mentioned, they phase out actually from using coal as their fuel for their electricity generation. And then from the financial side, Korea and Japan, I think they joined, with the larger financing companies in the world. They rejected actually, all the coal-related financing proposal. So this definitely will put, more pressure on the coal industry. And that's translated, it will put pressure on Indonesia as the second largest coal exporter in the world. So first is actually the pressure is actually from the demand of the coal itself, and then second actually from the investment cost, because it will make the investment cost even more expensive, and then let alone the coal selling price that had been sluggish even before the pandemic. And then even though Indonesia is not exporting our coal to the company in European as well as in US, but however, the total coal consumption in the world definitely will affect Indonesia export of coal. So if I read from one of the article in the Guardian, they mentioned that European import of coal in 2020 was plunged actually by almost two-thirds year on year compared to last year. So which is this is actually the lowest in the 30 years. And in 2020, US will produce their electricity from renewable more than from coal. And it is predicted that in 5 years down the road, it's only 10% of electricity generation in US will be actually fueled by coal. And having said that, this is actually 50% down compared to a decade ago. And in UK, I read from one of the article, they had not burned any single coal actually for the 35 consecutive days uninterrupted. So this is actually the longest period ever since 230 years ago. That's according to one of the article when the industrial revolution started. So I believe, while definitely coal-fired power plant will not be disappear in the near future. However, I think the world will reduce their dependency and using of coal as the fuel for the electricity generation in the years to come. And
Ma'am, here there is one important question, which many people will like to know from India and also from other countries, and that is
mhm,
about the potential in Indonesia domestic market. We would like to know about the cabotage and also how the foreign players are welcomed.
okay, I think with relation to the potential in Indonesia, uh, you know that Indonesian other bulk commodities exported from Indonesia is actually a nickel ore. So Indonesia was actually one of the largest nickel ore exporter before 2009, where in 2009, actually the government of Indonesia issued a law number 4 that year that prohibits iron ore export activity from Indonesia. But instead, they requires actually that iron ore to be processed in Indonesia. So with this law, the government of Indonesia expected that the value-added industry definitely will be established in Indonesia. So the need for the raw material for the downstream industry will be then fulfilled by local processed nickel ore. So this creation of the value-added activities was actually expected to boost the state or the government of Indonesia revenue, as well as to absorb more on the local labor. But what that actually means for the industry. So having said that, actually, the investor as well as the company who were, an exporter of nickel ore in Indonesia, they are actually, being requested to build a smelter in Indonesia. And then since the implementation of this law number 4, 2009, I think around 10 new smelters was actually built and in operation, in addition to 3 existing smelters. And 14 more smelters are now under construction. So with these many smelters in operation, then it's not only boosting the nickel-based industry in Indonesia, but also increase the domestic coal consumption for the smelters power plant. And what's that mean for us as the logistic company in Indonesia? The coal movement then, the coal movement as well as transportation within, Indonesian water from Kalimantan to Sulawesi and other part of Indonesia is increased significantly. And it requires actually not only barges, but also a larger vessel such as Handymax as well as Panamax. And in addition to that, because of, not all the nickel mine has its own smelters, meaning that, some of these nickel ores has to be transported using the barges or mother vessel from the mine site to the nearby vessel. So with this, changes in nickel ore industry, then it's create actually another opportunity for any shipping company, as well as for any logistic and infrastructure company to be part of the development of nickel ore industry in Indonesia. That's from what I see. And then talking about the Cabotage law, I think, in addition to the protection of nickel ore in Indonesia, Indonesia also has a cabotage law for the shipping industry that doesn't allow any non-Indonesian flag shipping company to operate in Indonesia. And I don't see, any indication that the government will relax or what's it called, terminate this cabotage law. But even, in the shipping industry, the regulation is getting more extensive. The fact that the Ministry of Trading, they issue their regulation number 82 in 2017, where actually the implementation has been postponed until last year. But those regulation actually requires all coal as well as palm oil that exported from Indonesia is using a mother vessel which is operated or managed under Indonesian shipping company. So this is actually, another potential. If any investor would like to tap into this protected shipping industry in Indonesia, they can actually have a joint operation with any Indonesian shipping company. But of course, there are some restriction. For example, the participation is what's it called, is limited to a maximum 49% of the ownership, and then there's some requirement actually need to be fulfilled. And the other industry that is actually developed in Indonesia is a gas industry. This is actually aligned with the government of Indonesian effort to diversify from coal. So just last year, I believe the Indonesian government just announced the conversion of their 52 power plant from the previously, a dirty fossil fuel or fired power plant to gas fueled power plant. So as the needs for the power plant is actually well spread around many islands in Indonesia, then to have an offshore electricity generation, logistic, and infrastructure is considered more economical rather than an onshore facilities. So that's actually create another potential, opportunity for any investor if they want to tap into a more greener energy in Indonesia. Because of, as I mentioned before, because of the need of the electricity is actually spread around many islands in Indonesia, then a floating storage and regasification unit is more what's it called is more suitable for the electricity generation in Indonesia. So several FSRU or floating storage and regasification unit has actually been built in Indonesia. For example, in Benoa, Bali, or Amurang, Sulawesi, and many other part of eastern of Indonesia. So this, creates an opportunity for a logistic and shipping and infrastructure company just like us, ABL, because we have a quite extensive experience in terms of operating an offshore or steel logistic infrastructure. And then this FSRU, I believe, has similarities to floating crane that we have already operated for a coal company, in a sense that it has, couple equipments that is installed in a vessel or barges that floating in the market. So, and in addition to that, this diversification to gas surely actually create another opportunities because this FSRU actually required a gas tanker as a feeder to this FSRU. And why actually this gas tanker feeder is required? First is because, the gas price in Indonesia itself is more expensive compared to the gas price exported from other country. And second, because not in each power plant location they have resources of the natural gas, so they have to bring the gas anyway from other part of Indonesia and or actually imported from another country. So that's actually the other potential of industry that is now actually becoming uh, what's it called eminent in Indonesia. So any investor
Thank you so
actually
much.
can
This
consider
is something which was important, and we wanted to know that how the international players can really can get some advantage there. So
yes,
thank you
yes.
very much. It has been pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Captain Virendra, for having us in your show. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.